Hi everybody, and welcome back to Plato-Senpai, where we philosophically analyze anime and maybe teach you something along the way. If you are new to the channel, thank you for visiting, and make sure to check out my previous videos in this series. Today we will be switching gears and talking about the concept of the butterfly effect, and how it is explored in MIRAI NIKKI. As always, this video may contain some spoilers if you haven't watched the anime, so consider yourself warned. When I did research on the butterfly effect, it quickly became evident that it was not primarily a philosophical idea, but rather one based on advanced mathematics and quantum physics. This is where I had to take a step back. Maybe it's just me, but I tend to notice that whenever the average person tries to invoke quantum physics to back up his point, it's a sure sign that he no longer knows what he is talking about. This is because even quantum physicists hardly know what quantum physics really is. So I'm not going to try to explain the parts that I know I don't understand. All that being said, what is the basic idea of the butterfly effect? The idea was first posed by a meteorologist named Edward Lorenz in 1963. He was interested in how chaos theory might relate to the weather, and famously pondered if a butterfly flapping its wings in Argentina could result in a tornado in Texas after 3 weeks. In other words, the very small changes caused in the atmosphere by the butterfly could trigger a kind of snowball effect, from a few air particles moving around in Argentina rolling into massive destabilization of the weather in Texas, thus causing the tornado. From the perspective of scientists and mathematicians, it is an extremely complex question with huge implications for just about everything in the physical universe. But for the philosopher, there are giant implications as well, depending on where you stand on other matters. If you are a materialist, meaning that you believe the material world is the only one that exists, and that things like spirits and souls and God do not exist because they are not physical entities, you would be inclined to say that the butterfly effect implies that we don't have free will. This is because chaos, as it is defined by mathematicians and scientists, is applicable only to something called a dynamic system, and dynamic systems are deterministic, meaning that they operate according to set rules of behavior. These kinds of systems are used to explain a variety of things people experience in the real world, from ecosystems to economies, and probably how long it takes to bake chocolate chip cookies provided you use the right ingredients. Of course, this applies to human behavior as well, which leads to the big question: do human beings really have free will, or are they just operating according to set laws of behavior that can be reduced to mathematical formulae? Let's see how MIRAI NIKKI answers the question. Consider the future diaries themselves for a moment. Although each diary is unique in what kind of information it tells its user and how it relays that information, one thing they all have in common is their reactivity to a shift in another user's actions. What is more important, however, is how the users themselves react to the information provided by their diaries. Third makes a move, first diary updates accordingly. First changes his plan and acts differently in light of the new information. Third's diary then updates based on first response. Third responds by changing his course of action, and the cycle repeats until someone is essentially checkmated and reaches his or her dead end. It may seem like there is an immense amount of strategy and deliberate choices going into the interplay between the diary users, but if one views humans as dynamic systems to whom the phenomenon of chaos applies, then the interaction between first and third is nothing but a loop of causes and effects. There is no room for freedom here. Dynamic systems are governed by particular laws, and even though the phenomenon of chaos can often reveal unique ways in which these laws play out, the laws of behavior were always determining the end result from the start. In that case, the interaction between first and third was always tending toward a fixed end predetermined by certain laws that govern each one of them as persons and that govern the interactions between them. So what started out as third merely walking toward a building resulted in his death, a small, insignificant event, triggering a larger, more catastrophic event. And that is an example of the butterfly effect. But what if you aren't a materialist who believes in deterministic models of existence? As one such critic of this view suggested, determination and predictability are not the same thing. Being determined and operated by fixed sets of rules is an ontological property, meaning that it applies to the very being of a thing. Predictability, however, is an epistemological quality, meaning it applies to how we think about things, not necessarily how things actually are. These two qualities do not necessarily overlap, although they can. So while one of the characters in Mirai Nikki might be predictable in their actions, and as far as the diaries are concerned, their actions are predicted, they aren't determined to commit those actions just because it was foretold that they would do so. What these two perspectives leave us in regards to this anime are two very different explanations for why events play out the way they do among the characters. Either the characters are reducible to nothing but marionettes played by the strings of physical laws to act as causes and suffer as effects in a predictable cycle of violence, or the foreknowledge provided by the diaries proves that they have free will, or at the very least does not say anything about their freedom or determination. One final clue may shed some light on this issue. In the first episode, Deus Ex Machina casually tells Yuki that he is fine-tuning the laws of causality. Shortly after that, the survival games begin. However, in the third episode, when Yuki opens the door and finds the dead bodies in the room, all the users' diaries seem to go haywire, and even the palace of Deus begins to physically shake. To this, Deus says that Yuki broke causality. Taken all together, it seems to imply that from the start, everyone's actions were determined, set into definite causal chains. But by Yuki discovering the dead bodies in Yuno's house, he thereby uncovered the crucial clue leading to the ultimate discovery that they are all living in a second universe. If everyone's diaries radically changed upon this discovery, and if Deus remarked that Yuki had then broken causality, it seems that the very deterministic model that undergirded the entire function of the diaries had also been nullified. But that would mean that Yuki was determined to find the bodies, but that the discovery itself was not taken into account when the game and the diaries were designed. This leads to an insane paradox. If all this is the case, then Yuki was determined by fixed laws to break free of those laws in such a way that the laws were broken themselves, thereby freeing everyone else. In short, they were all determined to be free. As far as our two opposing models are concerned, the show seems to suggest that the deterministic model applies only for the first 3 episodes, while the non-deterministic model applies to the episodes after that. So if a boy walks into a room and sees some corpses, can it cause him to become God several months later? And now we find ourselves back at the butterfly effect. Thank you all so much for watching. I have to admit that this was a tough video to make, since I had to dance around the physics and the math of the theory in order to get to the philosophy plain and simple. Also, because this video already talked a lot about causality and focused also quite a bit on free will, I might not make separate videos on those subjects, but all that remains to be seen. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, you know the rules of YouTube etiquette. Like and subscribe. And don't forget to share this video and comment below. Also, speaking of comments, which anime do you want to see me discuss next? Let me know in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video. Stick around.